VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today here on the VCY American Network. And the topic that we need to discuss here today is not one that is pleasant, not one that we look forward to, but one that we must. We have often indicated the role of a watchman, and that is to blow the trumpet when there is danger that's approaching. That was what the watchman was to do. He was to blow the trumpet, to alert the people that there is danger out there. And friends, we're going to be doing that today as we talk about a topic called the transing of a nation. The transing of a nation. And we're going to be talking about some issues today that will just show case in point, again, where we are. But friends, it's always good to start with Scripture itself. To understand, as it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. We see that is throughout Scripture. We see that also in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus was even questioned about marriage. And he was saying, haven't you heard from the beginning that God made them male and female? We see what happens to a society that turns its back on God. And yes, you've heard it often on Crosstalk, but we go to Romans chapter 1 because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. And so we see those who profess themselves to be wise becoming fools. Verse 24 of Romans 1, wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own heart, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. We also see in verse 26, for this cause God gave them up unto vile affections. Even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust one toward another. Men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of the error which was meet. And then we see in verse 28, even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. Indeed, that's where we are in society today, and so I'll be talking about the transing of a nation. First of all, though, just to make comment about yesterday in the arraignment of former President Trump, the Daily Signal is reporting that former President Trump delivered stinging remarks condemning not just the New York case where he was arraigned yesterday afternoon, but all of the investigations targeting him. He said, I never thought anything like this would happen in America. He mentioned this last night at Mar-a-Lago. The only crime that I've committed is to fiercely defend our nation from those who seek to destroy it. He later said Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, whose grand jury brought the indictment, should be prosecuted or resigned for the fake case, saying our justice system has become lawless. They're using it now in addition to everything else to win elections. Well, we know that there are likely going to be a number of motions filed. There's so much going on with this issue here. And I understand this next on the court agenda, really, until motions are filed, is not until the month of December. So just wanted to make mention pertaining to it. But as we turn back here to this matter of transing a nation, we are seeing this take place and really heightened what happened just a week ago Monday, as Matt Vespa from townhall.com reports that transgender male mass shooter Audrey Hale plotted the attack for months. Journals found in Hale's car and home revealed the blueprints for the attack on Covenant School, a private Christian academy. Hale was biologically female, but identified using the male pronoun. 6 people were killed, including 3 children. The thing's also not surprising. The media has long forgotten this school shooting that occurred on March 27th, and the red herrings are flopping all over the deck. The families of the 6 people killed by Hale are not the real victims. The real victim, friends, they're reporting, is the transgender community. Some radical activists have included Hale as one of the shooting victims. Hale was taken down by police who arrived and neutralized the threat around 14 minutes after the first emergency call. The political correctness nonsense is slowly seeping through, with law enforcement reticent to offer a motive. though adding that resentment played a role in this attack. For now, police are comfortable chalking up Hale's motivations as those of any other mass killer. The shooting is soaked in politics. Hale intentionally picked a Christian school to assault, which came after legislation targeting drag shows was passed. Remember, anything targeting the LGBT community is viewed as an assault on all, part of the intersectionality discussion that is very popular among leftists. Well, the next significant development in this case is when police reveal the contents of the journals. Hale left a manifesto, and Vespa says it's about time this was released to the public. Front Page Mag, Daniel Greenfield, saying that Audrey Hale's massacre of children and teachers at the Covenant Church School in Nashville makes her one of only 3 female mass rampage killers in America. But Audrey had wanted to be a man. Audrey Elizabeth Hale changed her name to Aiden, cut her hair short, covered it with a red cap, put on camo pants, and began killing children. The majority of Audrey's 6 victims were women and little girls. That's likely no coincidence, he writes. His piece says that hating her own sex, Audrey set out to destroy women and girls as she had destroyed her own femininity. That's the viewpoint of Daniel Greenfield. But friends, in light of what has taken place, and we've shared previous on Crosstalk, the leftists have mocked prayer following this school shooting in Nashville. As Alan Morrow wrote, that leftists are using Monday's Nashville Christian school mass shooting as an excuse to mock prayer and ridicule Tennessee's laws on transgender surgeries for minors. Audrey Hale, a 28-year-old woman who identifies as a man, gunned down 6 people, including 3 students at Nashville's Covenant Christian School Monday. That would be a week ago Monday. Hale attended the school as a child. David Pacman, a progressive talk show host, took to Twitter to ask if the shooting occurred because the Christian school wasn't praying enough. Very surprisingly, that would be a mass shooting at a Christian school, given that lack of prayer is often blamed for these horrible events, Pacman wrote in a now-deleted tweet. Is it possible they weren't praying enough or correctly despite being a Christian school? Sports writer Mike Wise praised the tweet that blamed the shooter's outrage on the school's religious indoctrination, saying there was a tweet that went out from someone named Kat Amarco that said, "I don't condone Audrey Hale's actions, so I understand their outrage against an intolerant state that brainwashes children through religious indoctrination. The reality is that this human still identified as that child attending that school and carried that pain into adulthood." Well, Fox News reports that Wise, this would be sports writer Mike Wise, replied to the tweet with, quote, "This is as deep and real as it gets. Thank you." The Daily Signal reporting that the transgender activists aim to police the speech of Americans, particularly when it comes to preferred pronouns, but some of them do not extend the Almighty the same courtesy. Charlotte Clymer, a biological male who identifies as a transgender woman, recently took to MSNBC to claim that conservatives cynically weaponize and exploit the deaths of children by pointing out the fact that the women who massacred 6 people in Nashville Christian school identified as transgender, according to police. Clymer went on to misgender God and claimed that God made Clymer transgender, saying, quote, "I served in the military. I go to church every Sunday. My faith is very important to me, but God made me in her image. God made me transgender," Clymer said. Now, folks, I just quoted from Scripture how God made us male and female. That word transgender is not there. But yet, it's okay to misgender God in all of this. WND.com is also reporting all of a sudden it appears to be acceptable for personalities, whether in education or politics or entertainment, to call for violence against Christians. The most recent involved Jocelyn Berry, the press secretary for Arizona Democrat Governor Katie Hobbs. After a transgender woman who was portraying herself as a man shot and killed 6 at a Christian school, Berry posted a clip from the 1980 movie Gloria showing actress Gina Rowlands with a handgun in each hand, pacing forward a few steps. Berry's accompanying comment is this: "Us when we see transphobes." So again, showing a Hollywood actor with guns poised and saying that's us when we see transphobes. Very shortly later resigned from her state position. Katie Hobbs said the post by the press secretary is not reflective of the values of the administration. But folks, keep in mind, as we shared on a recent crosstalk about the comments that had been made by Jane Fonda as she was on ABC's The View, that murder would be the solution to the abortion industry's problem with pro-lifers. You remember the clip? And the other hosts were kind of nervous, but saying, oh, she's just kidding. Jane Fonda didn't crack a smile. She was not kidding. And I bring all this up because, friends, you may not know this, but the White House just held last Friday a roundtable on affirming gender-confused children amid ongoing controversy about subjecting minors to life-altering chemical and surgical mutilation. The story I'm looking at right now is from LifeSiteNews.com. The roundtable on affirming transgender kids was held to hear directly about the joys, hopes, and challenges that transgender children are experiencing and commemorate the April 1st Transgender Day of Visibility, according to the White House. Transgender kids and their parents shared their experiences living in states that have attacked their rights, discussed how these laws have impacted their mental health, and highlighted how parents are protecting their children. The event was hosted by Biden administration domestic policy advisor Ambassador Susan Rice and U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, according to a White House release following the event. As one roundtable participant shared, it feels scary when the politicians elected to represent you don't care about your well-being. The evidence, however, indicates that the affirming camp are the ones disregarding the well-being of gender-confused young people. Studies find that more than 80% of children experiencing gender dysphoria outgrow it on their own by late adolescence, and that even full reassignment surgery often fails to resolve gender-confused individuals' heightened tendency to engage in self-harm and suicide, and may even exacerbate it, including by reinforcing their confusion and neglecting the actual root causes of their mental strife. On top of these issues, experts outside the medical establishment further warn that surgically or chemically reinforcing gender confusion imposes irreversible harm on children, such as infertility, impairment of adult sexual function, reduced life expectancy, as well as the psychological toll of being locked into physical alterations regardless of whether they change their minds when they mature. The issue is grimly illustrated in the story of Yali Martinez, a 19-year-old to whom gender transitioning was touted as a possible cure for her depression in high school, supported by a high school counselor who withheld her what she was going through from her mother. The troubled girl killed herself after trying to live as a man for 3 years. Many oft-ignored detransitioner individuals who attempted to live under a different gender identity before embracing their true sex attest to the physical and mental harm of reinforcing gender confusion, as well as to the bias and negligence of the medical establishment on the subject. Even so, the Biden administration has not only taken a hardline stance in favor of transitioning minors, but has condemned leaders who disagree, and in his words, as, quote, close to sinful. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America as we talk about the transing of a nation. We'll be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, over the years, we've read a lot from science about amber. Has DNA ever been recovered from it?
Chris, there are fragments of DNA found in amber, but it's well known that DNA decomposes in such a short period of time that even in thousands of years you'd not expect to find much DNA left. But now an even more remarkable thing has been found that has thrown evolution into a tizzy. Entombed within the bodies of insects fossilized in amber are ancient bacteria which scientists have been able to revive. They've actually come back to life. Over 3,500 types of microorganisms have been rejuvenated. Chris, how can this be? This amber is thought to be millions and millions of years old, but how could things still be alive after all that time? Chris, I think it's the evolutionary story and the story of millions of years which is wrong. The Back to Genesis view makes a whole lot more sense.
Thanks for tuning in to Back to Genesis.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and this is Crosstalk discussing the transing of a nation. And friends, actually, this is taking place in many locations around the world as well. But we're focusing in on the U.S. of A. here at this particular point. We'll have some stories that refer to some other matters going on in other nations. But we know that this past weekend, even just within days after the transgender shooting that took place at this Christian school, that there was a day of rage that was planned, a transgender day of rage, a trans day of rage that was scheduled for this past weekend. And day by day by day, as we're getting closer, yes, it's still on, yes, it's still on. Finally, at the last moment, they said, no, it's discontinued. Safety concerns. Well, we see what's going on as the White House continues to push this. I'll be referring in just a moment to a proclamation that President Biden issued. But as I mentioned just before the break, that he condemned leaders who disagree with this transitioning as being close to sinful. I continue reading that in April of 2022, the administration issued documents to the HHS Office of Population Affairs and HHS Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration National Child Traumatic Stress Network, endorsing gender-affirming care for transgenders and non-binary children and adolescents. Last December, U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Javier Becerra submitted written answers to Republican Representative Mary Miller of Illinois, stating that HHS is focused on ensuring that care is not stigmatized or denied based on a youth's gender identity is consistent with the law, reiterating that medical, surgical, mental health, and non-medical procedures to affirm patients' gender dysphoria are supportive forms of health care by aligning their outward physical traits with their gender identity, that all children and adults should be afforded these treatments, and declaring that players, both public and private, should cover them. Becerra refused to disavow the stance in the congressional testimony just last week. We see also reported from LifeSiteNews.com that President Joe Biden attacked states with laws banning genital mutilation of children. It's in a proclamation declaring Friday Transgender Visibility Day. This past Friday, it was a proclamation that was released on Thursday, shortly after declaring that gender-confused people shape America's soul. And I'd like to share with you this proclamation. This is the one occupying the chief executive office of our land. A proclamation on Transgender Day of Visibility. Transgender Day of Visibility celebrates the joy, strength, and absolute courage of some of the bravest people I know, people who have too often had to put their jobs, relationships, and lives on the line just to be their true selves. Today we show millions of transgender and non-binary Americans that we see them. They belong, and they should be treated with dignity and respect. Their courage has given countless others strength, but no one should have to be brave just to be themselves. Every American deserves that freedom. Transgender Americans shape our nation's soul, proudly serving in the military, curing deadly diseases, holding elected office, running thriving businesses, fighting for justice, raising families, and much more. As kids, they deserve what each child deserves, the chance to learn in safe and supportive schools, to develop meaningful friendships, and to live openly and honestly. As adults, they deserve the same rights enjoyed by every American, including equal access to health care, housing and jobs, and the chance to age with grace as senior citizens. But today, too many transgender Americans are still denied those rights and freedoms. A wave of discriminatory state laws is targeting transgender youth, terrifying families, and hurting kids who are not hurting anyone. An epidemic of violence against transgender women and girls, in particular women and girls of color, has taken lives of far too soon. Last year's Club Q shooting in Colorado was another painful example of this kind of violence, a stain on the conscience of our nation. By the way, didn't they discover that somebody non-binary conducted that? It's what I'm recalling at this point. My administration, as I continue on reading, has fought to end these injustices from day one. Now, we talked about this kind of violence. Not a word. This is just a few days after the shooting in Nashville. Not a word in regard to it. My administration has fought to end these injustices from day one, working to ensure that transgender people and the entire LGBTQI+ community can live openly and safely. On my first day as president, I issued an executive order directing the federal government to root out discrimination against LGBTQI plus people and their families. We've appointed a record number of openly LGBTQI plus leaders, and I was proud to rescind the ban on openly transgender people serving in the military. We are also working to make public spaces and travel more accessible, including more inclusive gender markers on United States passports. We're improving access to public services and entitlements like Social Security. We are cracking down on discrimination in housing and education. And last December, I signed the Respect for Marriage Act into law, ensuring that every American can marry the person they love and have that marriage accepted, period. Meanwhile, we're also working to ease the tremendous strain that discrimination, bullying, and harassment can put on transgender children, more than half of whom seriously considered suicide in the last year. The Department of Education is, for example, helping to ensure that transgender students have equal opportunities to learn and thrive at school. At the Department of Justice is pushing back against extreme laws that seek to ban evidence-based, gender-affirming health care. Folks, can you imagine? I'm going to continue on in just a moment, but employing the Department of Justice to go after states that don't allow children to be mutilated? He said there is much more to do. I continue to call on the Congress to finally pass the Equality Act and extend long overdue civil rights protections to all LGBTQI plus Americans to ensure they live with safety and dignity. Together, we also have to keep challenging the hundreds of hateful state laws that have been introduced across the country, making sure every child knows that they are made in the image of God, that they are loved, and they are standing up for them. Mr. President, understand that God in His Word says He created them male and female. America is founded on the idea that all people are created equal and deserve to be treated equally throughout their lives. We have never fully lived up to that, but we have never walked away from it either. Today, as we celebrate transgender people, we also celebrate every American's fundamental right to be themselves, bringing us closer to realizing America's full promise. Well, that's hogwash, folks. I mean, what about those girls who do not want biological males coming into their locker rooms, dressing rooms, and showers? What about those girls on sports teams who have worked hard, hours, days, months, years to exceed in their sport, only be taken over by one who is claiming to be transgender? Now, therefore, I, Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim March 31, 2023, as Transgender Day of Visibility. I call upon all Americans, folks, that's you, to join us in lifting up the lives and voices of transgender people throughout our nation and to work toward eliminating violence and discrimination against all transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people. In witness whereof, I hereto set my hand this 30th day of March in the year of our Lord. Please don't invoke God in this. 2023, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 247th, Joseph R. Biden, Jr. That proclamation, did you know about it? That proclamation issued for last Friday, March 31. CNSnews.com on March 31 also told of the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who put out a statement on Friday to celebrate the International Transgender Day of Visibility, saying on Transgender Day of Visibility, the United States reaffirms that transgender rights are human rights. We celebrate the achievements and resilience of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming persons around the world. And then also said we underscore the work that remains to ensure that all transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming persons are able to live authentically, safely, and with dignity. He goes on, I will not have time to read that, but it is not only him. We also see the HHS Secretary, Javier Becerra, suggesting as a father, he supports federally funded child sex changes. He refused to disavow the surgical or chemical gender transitioning of minors last week, again signaling that the Biden administration's uncompromising, fealty to the demands of LGBT activists. Daily Caller reported that Becerra was testifying before the House Appropriations Committee on Tuesday last week, initially about the administration's spending priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. But he was asked a question about gender-affirming care. and asked the question, is the president serious? He wants to take our childhood health insurance program and pay for this, he was asked. And Becerra said, I want to be careful how I answer this because I answer this as secretary, but I also answer this as a father. This is a very simple question. Does the president want to use CHIP's money to pay for gender mutilation surgery? The representative asked. He said, if it's a simple question, I will tell you that simple answer is we want to make sure everyone in America has access to the health care that they need. So the answer is yes. The Washington Stand with the Family Research Council indicates that on this Transgender Day of Visibility, that it led to international violence. Angry transgender activists surrounded a Canadian conservative, punched his throat. In America, LGBT demonstrators physically or verbally harassed conservative counter-protesters, and 2 Christian schools canceled classes due to violent threats issued in the shadow of this mass murder. 3 scenes of mayhem played out at a spate of violence, intimidation, and threats spanning at least 2 countries, marked the annual Transgender Day of Visibility that was held March 31st, and by and on those behalf of those who identify as members of the opposite sex. Indicates that on the West Coast, members of the radical group Trans Rights Activists congregated at the intersection of Hollywood Boulevard and Highland Avenue in Los Angeles last Friday, blocking passing cars and chanting, "Whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets." And then between the 2 coasts, 2 Christian schools in the same town, Resurrection Christian School and Loveland Classical Schools, Loveland, Colorado, canceled classes last Friday after receiving multiple threats. Despite the killings, despite the future threats of violence, President Joe Biden issued 2 statements celebrating this year's Transgender Day of Visibility, proclaiming transgender Americans shape our nation's soul. Matter of fact, the document from the White House, which I was hoping to get into, 10 pages long, is called a fact sheet. White House honors Transgender Day of Visibility. You can look it up for yourself, friends. You can do a web search on White House honors Transgender Day of Visibility and find out much more information on there. But they're directing every agency across these United States to strengthen LGBTQI plus rights. It's part of the goal. It's part of the mission. It's part of their transing of a nation. That's really what is at play here. Friends, after the shooting took place, people were waiting to come out to hear the president speak, his statement condemning what took place at the Christian school in Nashville. And friends, as he stepped up to the podium, he joked. He joked about ice cream and eating ice cream, and he's got a lot of flavors, upstairs, or however he said it. But friends, he was joking about eating ice cream, and then calling out some children that he saw up front, and talking about their looks as well. It's despicable what's happening to our nation right now. Indeed, we have the transing of a nation going on. And friends, it doesn't stop there. We'll have more to report following the break. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Dave Cristiano has produced and directed impactful Christian films addressing timely issues. This month, authored is a set of his productions including the 90-minute Power of the Air, in which a missionary from Africa warns of the danger the church in America is facing due to the influence of the media the church is consuming. Also in this package are 3 25-minute productions from 7th Street Theater, including On the Air, addressing the issue of depression, The Bus Stop, addressing the matter of prayer, and Mayday, an evangelistic film comparing the days of Noah to the return of Christ. This set of DVDs is available for a donation of $20 with additional sets to the same address for an additional $12 donation per set. Call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829. You may also visit vcyamerica.org.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. And friends, the issue today, as we mentioned, not a pleasant one, but you need to be warned as to what is going on in our society. Were you aware that the president had this big event take place last week? This 10-page document from the White House ordering all of these cabinet offices to be implementing this throughout the nation, and then we also see the proclamation that he drafted and wrote, and just days after this horrible shooting in Nashville by one identifying a biological female identifying as a male. No words about that taking place this past weekend. And friends, it doesn't stop there. Now, I point this out, folks, there is hope, there is help, there's change. These are people for whom Christ died. All of us can come to Christ and seek forgiveness. Scripture says, such were some of you. There is indeed hope and help, salvation that's found in Jesus Christ. We do not condone the lifestyles. We do not condone sin. Fox News is reporting this week that the Boston Children's Hospital co-director at its Center for Gender Surgery has called for a drastic increase in capacity for what he called gender-affirming care, GAC, including surgeries for kids, as different states are enacting bans on the practices. Oren Gaynor is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon who specializes in gender-affirming surgeries, has previously stated in an email that the hospital is slightly flexible when it comes to the age of transgender girls seeking genital surgery, according to a local outlet. The policy had not been finalized, he said, because of the issues around consent for sterilization. Folks, think about this. In a March 14th article he co-wrote with a medical school student, Shawheen Rizal, in the Journal of American Medicine Association, that he said that the capacity for gender surgeries for kids needs to be increased. Authors recommended medical school residency programs to expose future physicians to GAC, again, that's gender-affirming care, by increasing training efforts for gender-affirming surgeries. Proponents of gender-affirming care believe it's life-saving treatment for children with a disproportionately high rate of suicide. In August, Boston Children's Hospital posted a video, which was later deleted, where a psychologist explained that a good portion of children she sees at the hospital's gender multi-specialty service clinic know their gender identity from the womb. Boston Children's Hospital also previously faced a wave of backlash over its Center for Gender Surgery that performs mastectomies on teenagers as young as 15 years of age. And friends, the indoctrination is taking place in many, many locations. I'll give you a few. Here's a story from the Daily Caller. A Minnesota elementary school hosting a gender resource fair for children and their families, featuring a drag story hour, according to a school website. Minneapolis Public Schools putting on an April 13th event for transgender and non-binary children at Loring Elementary School, featuring local gender non-conforming resources, a bounce house, games, and dinner, according to the St. Paul Public Schools website. The elementary school event includes a drag story hour for kids. Dr. Angela Cade Goepford, the medical director of Children's Minnesota Gender Health Program, who uses they-them pronouns, is the guest speaker for the event the flyer showed. Across the country, school districts are pushing to promote gender identity lessons to elementary students. An elementary school principal in Minnesota suggested kindergarten through the second grade students read Jack, not Jackie, a story about a young girl who realizes she prefers to act like a boy. In Pennsylvania, an elementary school held a training for educators to teach them how to create a gender-inclusive classroom and affirm LGBTQ identities. Now, I mentioned this one event at Loring Elementary School in Minnesota. In the 2021-2022 school year, 42% of students are proficient in math. 42% of the students met grade level expectations for reading. Only 42%. 42% proficient in math and reading. But my, oh my, they are well indoctrinated in transgenderism. The Daily Caller also pointed out this week, just 2 days ago, that an Arizona school district encouraged students to attend queer spring break activities put on by an organization aimed at serving the LGBTQ youth. In an effort to provide supports for our queer students, Chandler Unified School District's Department of Counseling and Social Services asked teachers to direct kids to a list of spring break activities put on by 1 in 10, a nonprofit that works to assist LGBTQ youths ages 14 to 24. They could attend events like Trans and Gender Nonconforming, Hair Journey, and Queer Island Utopia during their time off from school. Also, Todd Starnes reporting, or Alan Morrow through his website, a viral video shows a drag queen straddling a student during a pride event at a North Carolina community college. Democrats believe it's permissible for a grown man to perform a lap dance on a child, said national radio host Todd Starnes, and anyone who disagrees with that they consider to be transphobic. Yeah, the Libs of TikTok account shows a drag queen straddling and dancing on an individual who's reported to be a high schooler. This is from a drag event where they also invited younger kids, Libs of TikTok wrote. As parent told me, the kid getting the lap dance is a 10th grader. Bud Light says they have a pact now with the trans activist Dylan Mulvaney and using transgenderism in promoting their brew. Okay, so you say those that are doing sinful things are going to do sinful things. But friends, they're after your children. They are after your children. And I'm going to show with you just a couple of ways in which that is happening. How many of you have ever been to Build-A-Bear? Build-A-Bear. Yeah, the place where you go in, you pick out this bear or dog or something, and you take it over to this machine, and you pick out a heart, and you put it inside, and they stuff this creature, and then they sew it up, and you give it a name, and then you can buy clothes and everything for it. Well, WesternJournal.com reported this week that Build-A-Bear Workshop, a stuffed animal store chain, has announced a new teddy bear modeled after the drag queen celebrity RuPaul. Start your engines. RuPaul Bear is ready to sashay into your collection. Mama Ru makes her debut on the Build-A-Bear main stage in the form of a first-ever RuPaul Bear. Build-A-Bear said of this new $56 teddy bear as they listed its many features. These include curly blonde hair, red lipstick, winged eyeliner, gold eyeshadow, a sparkling gold sequin dress, and gold paw pads that feature the RuPaul logo. A pair of matching heels can also be bought for an additional $8. RuPaul announced the collaboration with Build-A-Bear in an unboxing video posted on Instagram in which the performer showcased the brown teddy bear and encouraged fans to check out the new toy. Build-A-Bear, ladies and gentlemen. They're after your kids, is my opinion. And we're seeing that. Now, we see these drag story hours that are being held all over. I have a clip that's just over 3 minutes long of a testimony that was given by Dylan Pontiff, a self-ascribed drag queen. I'm not going to take the time to air the entire clip, but I'm going to excerpt, because I've played it before here on Crosstalk, but I just want to excerpt just one little aspect as you can see what the goal is from those identifying as a drag queen.
But I'm here to let you know that this event is something that's going to be very beautiful. And for the children and the people that support it are going to realize that this is going to be the grooming of the next generation. We are trying to groom the next generation to not see the way that they just did.
Yeah, you're talking about the audience that was, just appalled at what was going on. We are here to groom the next generation. Folks, that's what's going on. That's in his own words, the grooming of the next generation. We see matters going on in Kentucky. Wasn't the Kentucky Capitol there just barraged with protesters? As Kentucky overrided the governor's veto to protect minors from transition procedures. That also happened late last week where 29-8 in the Senate, 76-23 in the House, the new law protects minors from dangerous transgender interventions. The Kentucky legislature overrode Governor Beshear's veto of the Do No Harm Act, enacting the bill into law. Kentucky now the sixth state with a law protecting vulnerable children from both sex change surgeries and experimental hormones aimed at transition. President Biden refers to things like this as being sinful. Being sinful. And friends, let me also mention to you, this from Just the News, Walt Disney World in Florida will host an LGBT plus conference this fall that organizers are calling it the world's largest. Out in Equal, an activist group that promotes equality for LGBT plus people in the workplace, is hosting its 2023 Workplace Summit for 3 days in September, according to the organization's website. The group says the summit is the largest LGBTQ plus conference in the world, with more than 5,000 attendees every year. Out in Equal's website also features a photo of Mickey Mouse and states that the summit will be held in Orlando, but does not specify that it will be at the resort itself. However, Chief Marketing Officer Michael Chamberlain confirmed on that Wednesday to the Tampa Bay Times the conference will be held at the Disney Resort. Walt Disney Company is listed as a top partner on the organization's website. Other top partners include Dell Technologies, J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, Apple, and Uber. The group also had government partners, including the CIA, the Food and Drug Administration, the State Department, and the Agriculture Department. And friends, I'm sad to say that this is hitting the religious community as well. Yes, it's going into many a liberal denomination, progressive denomination, woke denominations. That's what, we talked about wokeism yesterday with Elaine Donnelly, taking progressivism or liberalism to extremes with coercion, even if it hurts the institution. And folks, that is what's going on. The Dissenter is reporting the Drag Queen Story Hour has been a perversion plaguing public libraries and schools around the nation for several years. But now it's also entering in for the Sunday morning worship at church. A recent spate of pulpit perversion. Church has been inviting drag queens to come in to address the children as parents willingly hand their kids over to them. In December, a church in Logan Square hosted a drag queen to have a prayer time with children, while earlier this month, another church hosted a drag queen to hold a dance party in lieu of biblical exegesis from a qualified pastor. And a Canadian church recently hosted an online event with a drag queen posing as God answering prayers. Is it safe to say that God is judging these false churches, giving them over to their depraved minds? Folks, it's unbelievable what is taking place. And that's why we call today's program The Transing of a Nation. We're seeing sports as well that are being done, that are biological males that are winning. I don't even know how they feel good about that, but taking away trophies, honors, placements from biological women. Golfmonthly.com just this week reported that Brianna Gill causes a transgender debate now after winning on the Australian Women's Tour. A transgender golfer going by the name of Brianna Gill won the first professional title at the Australian Women's Classic in New South Wales. I'd like to open our phone lines here for our final segment and get your reaction to these issues today. Our number to crosstalk is 800-733-9829. 800-733-9829, as we are witnessing the transing of a nation. The transing of a nation. And friends, it's happening on so many different fronts. It's happening from the White House on down. It is happening within the educational institutions. It's happening from corporate America. It's happening within sports. It's happening on so many levels, and now even Build-A-Bear. Back in a moment. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewreport.com. January 13th, 2023, it is out there online that a video game was released that is all about transgenders fighting gender fascists. And the gender fascists, well, they are Christians. They're conservatives. The video game depicts breaking people free from a gender fascist concentration camp and includes the killing of an individual wearing a clerical robe with a cross on the left and right chest. Interesting and sad that this video game came out in January And just a few weeks later, we have an attack by an admitted transgender individual attacking a Christian school and killing 3 adults and 3 children. Is there the setting up and the hunting of Christians? I'm Brandon House.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Here's a chance for your feedback on the warnings that have been given today as to where we're headed as a nation. Our number is 800-733-9829. All lines are packed right now. As soon as you hear somebody hang up with their call, that's your opportunity to get in on today's program. We're going to begin with Barry calling from Tennessee. Hi, Barry. You're on the air.
Yes, Jim. We act like this is something new, all this perversion and such in that. That spirit has always been there.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible speaks of as in the days of Noah. It was there. It's just been suppressed. God put the church in the world to suppress all that. But you read about it in Romans 1 when you first started off.
Yeah.
It said when they change the truth of God into a lie, they make God into something he's not. We watered down God from the pulpits. For this, when you compromise that gospel, it becomes a perverted gospel. When you have a perverted gospel, you'll have a perverted people. It's not Joe Biden. It's not all these transgenders, all these people. It's not their fault. It's the church's fault. God's trying to get our attention. It's like that commercial say, can you hear me yet? Unless we get back on our face before God and do what, and our preachers get in that pulpit and stop worrying about offending people and start preaching what thus saith the Lord, we're going to go by way of all the rest of the world. That's just the way it is.
Barry, thank you for your thoughts. Chris in Hancock, Michigan, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. It is a hard topic to hear. It's a hard topic to discuss. But I wanted to tell you I had a real interesting conversation with Riley Gaines in the past week, and she was the female swimmer facing up against William Thomas, and he likes to call himself Leah. Man has broad shoulders. He's a man wearing a woman's swimsuit. Anyway, she said at one of her meets, they were all in the locker room, and nobody warned them that this William Thomas was going to be there. And suddenly she said the whole room went silent. And she turned around to see where everybody was looking, and there he was changing in the women's locker room. Long hair, so, he wants to think he's a girl, but he had full male genitalia exposed to them, and she said that was it for her. That was it. She felt violated, sick to her stomach, and it's not just happening in swimming, it's happening in so many women's sports.
Yes.
And it was 22 years old, and she's making a difference in legislation and just trying to get the word out that this is beyond what you can imagine, and she lived it. And I just wanted to say, too, that the people who say that they are for love are the same ones who don't care if the babies are killed through abortion. They don't care if the teens are mutilated with sex change surgeries, and they don't care if these kids are sterilized, and they surely don't care about their spiritual well-being. So I agree with the man who just spoke. Yeah, the churches, we've got to get on this. And thanks so much for what you're doing. Much appreciated.
Thank you for the call here today, Chris. And let's go next to Kevin, Richland Center, Wisconsin. You're on the air.
Yeah, Jim, the Lord gave me a simple word. It's called anarchy. If you look it up and have your reader or your listeners look up the word anarchy, it means without ruler, and that's God. So it's a lawlessness in a government that has to do with disorder and confusion, and that's what Satan's all about. So sometimes a simple word can help everybody in the world that's Christian and even Jewish to understand this. This is just another aspect of a tool of anarchy that Satan is using, and we can make it very simple because he gives us words so we understand what Satan's up to.
Thank you, Kevin. Every man did that which is right in their own eyes. We see that often throughout Scripture, and you see that. You read the progression in Romans chapter 1, where God gave them over. Marcy is next to Duluth, Minnesota. You're on the air.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for taking my call. Many, many years ago when a group of us from our church were fighting the pornography issue, we invited 91 churches to come in and listen to a speaker and have a meal. We had 9 people there that showed up. This whole thing of pornography, the changing of our children's mind. I have in front of me a book called It's Perfectly Normal, Changing Bodies, Growing Up Sex and Sexual Health. It is a despicable cartoon illustrated book with figures naked. And they put this in front of our children, even down as young as 4 years old.
Yeah.
50 years of this, folks. Okay, now the church is starting to hear the ramifications of their neglect of their children in these public indoctrination schools. It started way back in the 1920s, is when socialist, communist, progressive teachings started coming into the schools. And where was the church when it came time for fighting against the evolutionary theory? They were silent. That poor man that was, I can't think of his name right now, that was the attorney against evolution, he stood alone. So this has been going on for decades, and everybody, look at yourself. What have you done to get involved in your children's education?
Thank you, Marcy.
It's just, they're not there.
Yep.
And now they're reaping what they sowed, which is just plain ignorance. But they had a choice to go there and look at it, and they didn't bother. I filmed the Duluth School District for 11 and a quarter years. No, I don't get paid for this. And parents were hardly there, but then when there were parents there, you can't believe the way the school district treated those parents. They
Marcy,
were ostracized, and they didn't want to come back because they were so beaten up, the few that would stand up against it.
Thank you, Marcy. Got to run. Nathan is next, Superior, Wisconsin. You're on the air.
I just wanted to speak briefly because I have some credible insight on the interior work of this movement. I was, and it's really hard to speak of. So,
tell you what, we're down to 60 seconds, so make your best point here right away.
Okay. This movement disfigures the bride of Christ. Being male and being female is not just a command, it's a duty. And it's a duty for males to be males for women and for our females. And for women or females to be women for men. And I just want to say that...
No, you're one or the other here. Males are not required to be female, Nathan.
That's correct. That's what I meant. I meant their duty is to be male for female.
Right.
I just wanted to lend some credibility because... As someone who was in the Navy, I was stationed as someone who's a spokesperson for this movement, and I just want to say that it's an incredibly violent thing.
Indeed, and I'm sorry I'm out of time here on the broadcast. Thank you for your comment. And to all of you coming in, friends, where is the church? And we need to look at that. No, we're too concerned about getting people through the doors. We don't want to offend. But friends, we must speak the truth in love from God's holy word, the Bible. Thank you for joining us here today on Crosstalk, and trust that the programs will stir us to be salt and to be light. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.